It is human nature to judge things whether we mean to or not. As people, we all have different opinions on the kind of clothes we wear, foods we eat, music we listen to, etc. We even have self-perceptions of ourselves. Knowing this, the real question becomes, how does our personal view and our worldview shape our identity? It is through various means of literature in which this question can be answered. Life experiences, point of view, and the society people grow up in all contribute to shaping an individual's identity. Alice Walker's novel, The Color Purple, shares all the adventures of a poor, barely literate Southern black woman. Celie, the main character, writes letters to God as she lives an isolated and cookie-cutter life. During this time period, a woman's role in society was hardly significant, especially if they had colored skin. When a dear friend of Celie's named Shug Avery rescues Celie from her solitary life, Celie is uncertain how to cope. Shug explains, "You not my maid. I didn't bring you to Memphis to be that. I brought you to love you and to help you get on your feet." This quote really expresses how Celie was raised for the first half of her life. It was clear that she was taught to always put others' needs before her own, but not in a good way. Through past experiences, Celie had been beaten and raped if she refused to do her chores. Reflecting back on those memories, Celie continued to serve Shug, as that was the only way she had learned how to live her life. So while Shug viewed Celie as a friend, Celie believed that she was just a housewife. Shifting over to how point of view shapes an individual's identity, Ishmael Bea's A Long Way Gone nonfiction memoir is a wonderful example. Bea's childhood journey was quite unique as he was drafted into the army and forced to fight as a boy soldier in Sierra Leone. Between raiding towns for food and treasures and killing off the enemy, Bea's identity became clear from the start. He was a fighter. More specifically, Peter Wilson's article proving the validity of Bea's story emphasizes how influential a person's point of view can be. Bea himself is interviewed by Wilson and strongly states two quotes, one of them reading, "I wrote the book from my point of view, as my experiences as a child in the war," while the second one claims, "I wrote about my account and my account is accurate in my memories as far as I can remember, and that is what I stand by." It was no doubt that what Bea went through was traumatizing. However, Bea makes it certain that while all the details may seem far-fetched, they are completely accurate because he experienced a first-hand account. His book was written in first point for a reason, and that was to share his story the way he lived it. Transitioning back to Celie in The Color Purple, Walker very much uses first-person point of view to convey Celie's identity. Celie writes most of the letters in the novel as she tells Nettie, her sister, and God all the experiences she has had to encounter. Although as the story progresses and Celie begins to develop her own voice, the point of view becomes much more developed and less childish. Mel Watkins, a book critique for the New York Times, specifically points out Celie's improved, mature tone. Watkins writes, "As the novel progresses, however, and as Celie grows in experience, her observations become sharper and more informed. The letters take on authority, and the dialect, once accepted, assumes a lyrical cadence of its own." Celie's personal letters that take on her point of view reflect her identity changing into a strong, independent woman. While she originally was a naive young lady, she becomes so much more towards the end of the novel. Walker's intention for writing in first person brought out Celie's true identity to Celie herself and the audience. Continuing on, Malcolm Gladwell's The Tipping Point distinctly explains how society can create a person's identity. Nature versus nurture was a major debate concerning which factor was more influential in developing a person's identity. Nature resembling the atmosphere an individual grows up in, while nurture refers to the genetic DNA one has. Although Gladwell explains the reasoning for both arguments, nature was more prominent. Gladwell writes, "They were simply following the internal rules of their culture, as if they were entirely blind to what adults said and did." Kids, especially teenagers, are highly influenced by culture. It is society who sets popular trends that kids follow to be cool. They never want to be seen as the outsiders, so they let society define them and give them a cookie-cutter identity rather than their own unique one. Flashback to the 1920s, also known as the Roaring Twenties. During this time period, famous author F. Scott Fitzgerald wrote the American classic The Great Gatsby. People's identities were strongly influenced by their society, as others tried to outcompete each other in the type of clothing they wore, car they drove, and who had the most treasures. The ideal end goal people were aiming towards was living their lives according to the American dream. Prior to reading The Great Gatsby, I learned idealism was a popular principle in the Roaring Twenties which led to the belief of the American dream. The American dream was an opportunity for prosperity and success. Society was a cheerful atmosphere because it emphasized people's right to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. Everyone viewed themselves quite highly as they all tried to live that American dream. It has been proven that throughout history, people's identity have been created through life experiences, point of view, and the society they grew up in. The pressure from these three factors have thoroughly shaped each and every one of us and our individual interests and judgments. The uniqueness of a person's identity can be found in literature and real life. However, because we are all human, not one identity is alike.